Good afternoon. Audience. May 1, Flathead Reservation Water Management Board meeting. So, as usual, we'd like to start with an opening prayer.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, we just want to take this moment and praise you and thank you for this opportunity to get together once again and serve our community. Just ask for your wisdom as we go through this agenda, that we can bring our good thoughts and intentions to it. We also want to lift up those in our community that are ailing or in need, and just ask that they be cared for as well. And we ask all this in your name. Amen.
Yeah. Thank you, Georgia. Meeting minutes can be found at the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board FRWMB.gov. And I think previously the minutes were available on the state and tribal websites, but they're now available on the board website. But anybody has an interest in following those? Any potential conflicts of interest with this agenda? So if you've had a chance to take a look at it, George?
No.
Roger? Ken?
Nope.
Okay, and none here, thank you. And attendance, please.
George McLeod.
Here.
Georgia Smith.
Here.
Clayton Matt.
Here.
Roger Noble.
Here.
Ken Pitt.
Here.
And Shane Henderson is absent and due to be attending probably in about half an hour.
All right, very good. So you've had a chance to take a look at the agenda. Comments, questions, additions, changes to the agenda. We'll take them now. Otherwise, we'll adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow, make a brief announcement after 1.6. So I knew 1.7, if you would, sir.
What would you like?
Just to add a brief announcement,
Just
as a new 1.7.
So it's just announcement.
Yep, just announcement.
Anything else? Good.
I'll make a motion. We adopt the agenda as modified.
Motion by Roger.
I'll second the motion.
Second by George. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, agenda, public comments for items not on the agenda. And
Oh, Mr. Chairman, there's a 1.6 before the public comment.
1.6 before the public comment, and a 1.7 apparently.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for slowing me down there. So introductions.
Excellent. Stand up there and introduce yourself, please.
Oh,
We
we have a new staff member, Sidney Palmer. Welcome, Sidney. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
And you can give as long a speech as you'd like, but or you're welcome to keep it brief, but good to see you.
Good to see you and happy to be here. My name is Sidney Palmer. I am the new water resource specialist for the water board. My family is from Montana and the reservation, but I am born and raised in Idaho, and I worked for the Idaho Water Resources previously.
Thank you, very good.
Happy to
Thank
be here.
you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sidney. Appreciate it.
If we give you more money, will you?
Mr. Chairman, we gotta do something about
Yes.
this.
We're gonna censor you, George.
All right, Mr. Chairman,
1.7.
1.7, thank you. I just would like to announce that yesterday I did make another job offer and we got an acceptance for a full-time compliance technician that'll start on May the 20th. Rhonda Botten will join our team. Very excited about that, and we'll put her on your agenda to let her introduce herself similarly at the appropriate time.
And how do you spell her last name?
Botten, sir.
Okay, very good. Oh, staffing up, very good. And what do you have left to staff up? Or what do we have left to staff up?
That's a little bit of a moving target, and I will probably be prepared to talk to you about an update to our org chart at a next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, public comments not for items not on the agenda, so let's start with anybody in the audience, any public comments here, anybody online?
Yeah, if you're online and you'd like to make a public comment, you can raise your hand and I'll allow you to speak. Seeing no public comments, Chairman.
No public comments there or here, but we do have a couple written public comments, and I think with the board's permission, we wanted to, I think the suggestion is to read those into the record. Sound good? Okay, all right, Ethan,
Would you like me to read these for
would you please?
the board, Mr. Chairman? All right. Mr. Chairman, the first written public comment that I received was from Joshua and Marissa Armadine and Anthony and Jordan Pierce. And I'll just read this into the record. I think you do have a copy of this in your materials, Mr. Chairman. To whom it may concern, we are the owners of 5295 Musket Lane in Missoula County. Joshua and Marissa Armadine and Anthony and Jordan Pierce. Finley Creek flows through our land, and when we purchased the property in 2020, it included water rights to the surface water of Finley Creek. Some identifying numbers are included. Shortly after purchase, we were informed by a neighbor about a shortage in the amount of water that is coming down the creek because of other landowners diverting the water upstream of our property. Our intentions with the property are to farm and raise livestock for our families and be more self-sufficient. Having water on the property for irrigation and livestock is a must. In early 2023, we planted 28 fruit trees with the intent of watering from the creek. This will also be our third year running a garden. This year, we have barely been able to fill a bucket from the creek because the water is getting diverted before it reaches our land. If we are unable to water our garden or trees, we will lose close to $5,000 that we have invested in the garden and orchard. We have also committed to helping a 4-H member this year in grazing their cattle and are now unsure whether we will be able to provide this service due to the lack of water. This will also make it impossible for us to move forward with livestock and growing feed for our animals. We ask the board move to assist us in the regulation and clear outline of use of water along with options when it is abused. We also ask that this could be done in a quick fashion. As stated above, this could be the difference in loss and damage of property and income. Our property has been on the water right. Our property has been on the water rights since the 1800s. We purchased the land from someone who had owned it for well over 20 plus years with a promise that the creek was a year-round creek even through the winter. The fact that there is no water running through our land in the beginning of spring, which is the natural flow of Finley Creek, is more than just concerning. We thank you for your consideration and haste in this matter. Thank you.
Comments, questions?
I'm not sure of the exact location where this is. But I know on Finley Creek at the mouth, we have in-stream flow there. And we were down to like 4 CFS at one time. But we haven't seen it de-watered at that site. Kevin Hallett's, no, not Kevin Hallett's, but Kevin lived across the street from him. Right where Finley Creek comes into the Jocko. And there is a secretariat that would be up to Shane to deal with. And we've had problems with that secretarial before. And when we get under in-stream flow, then usually the superintendent calls them and lets them know their liability if they don't get some water back into the stream. But I was gonna try and take time to look up where this was, so I could be more sure about where it's located. I'll be able to do that tomorrow.
Any other comments?
Do you know where it's located at, Ethan?
Yes,
Other than just, is it between E Canal and Finley Creek at the mouth?
I'm familiar with the spot and we can show you on a map afterwards if you'd
Okay.
like to.
Mhm.
So, I imagine a couple of things. One, are you in a position to investigate this, and are we in a position to do anything at this time?
Mr. Chairman, board members, where we're at is that we have a complaint process that has gone out through a 15-day public notice and that you've generally agreed to. It is part of the current WPMP. And as a reminder, my office and your legal counsel has urged you to also move forward with the Office of the Engineer Hearing and Appeal process that is outlined in the current WPMP, and that we find it to be an essential need to have those processes in place before we are accepting complaints. Furthermore, James will remind me that, you'll also need to eventually approve a complaint form. You've generally seen a draft complaint form that was specifically drafted to your request, but my current sorry, that's a long answer to a short question, but generally I would say we need to kick the current draft WPMP out for public comment when this board is ready for it, and then circle it back and have it adopted before we'd like to do this. There is an alternative where we start looking at complaints in advance of those policies, but my preference would be to have those policies adopted by the board so that we all have a chance in this stepping, and we know that our administration will match what the board's approval for the policy would be.
I'm curious about what the facts are, and regardless of the policy, if there's something we can do to at least determine what the facts are. Whether we do anything about it or not, I can't do anything about it yet. I don't, is that something we can do?
Mr. Chairman, board members, we have already done a fact finding mission about this issue, so we would be pretty loaded. Should the board take action, we would be ready to take an immediate look at it.
Are there facts that are pertinent to share with the board at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I do not believe that would be a wise way to proceed.
Okay.
The policies and procedures for the complaint driven process is what I would really like to pursue. There is an orderly method of occurrence that would happen before this board would be presented any information about that. And the reason is because depending on the outcome of what happened with the resolution for that complaint process, this board very well would serve as an appellate body for.
Mr. Chairman, something,
Yes.
I would caution the board of doing any independent investigations or having any facts from the engineer until the process, because we do sit as a quasi judicial body. And where our review is going to be pretty much limited to the record that the engineer puts together.
Okay, understood. And my last question is, are they aware of the potential role the irrigation project might play, and do they know how to contact them? And if we haven't provided them with that, that might be something we could do. Beyond that, I didn't have any other questions. Anything else? Okay, we're in the record on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the board's wishes, I do have another written, public comment. And you want me to hope that my last reading is adequate? If you would like, I could read this one,
Please.
also. Mr. Chairman, board members, this next communication is from the city of Polson, from the office of the city manager. Dated April 29, 2024, written to the chairman and the board. The purpose of this letter is to express frustration with the pace at which the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board has developed processes for existing and future water users to engage with the FRWMB to obtain new water rights or change existing water rights. As you may be aware, the city of Polson holds several state-based water rights for municipal use. Due to past litigation, Ciotti ruling in parenthetic, the city of Polson has been unable to obtain additional water rights or change existing water rights for approximately 25 years. Our inability to pursue water rights has impacted our ability to effectively meet our growth demands in recent years. Excuse me, in recent years, Polson has been approached by a number of private developers interested in expanding the city's service area. Additionally, the city has identified areas of potential growth through recent engineering and planning efforts. To appropriately expand our services to meet these growing demands, our water rights must be updated to reflect this change. In addition, the city has developed a new source of drinking water, which will help ensure a safe and reliable supply of water for the city for years to come. Currently, the additional source of water is required to meet our demand, but is not adequately permitted, leaving the city in an uncomfortable position regarding the future development of our water system. Polson has an immediate need to rectify our water rights so that they accurately reflect our present use and allow for future expansions of our water system to meet our growing demands. At the time of this letter, the FRWMB has been operational for approximately 2 years. In anticipation of this, Polson has taken a proactive approach to resolve our water rights.
My speaker is going belly up. I'm gonna have to run and find another speaker. Excuse me.
In anticipation of this, Polson has taken a proactive approach to resolving our water rights, our water right concerns, and has hired a consulting firm to develop an application for new beneficial use and change applications to correct our existing water rights. Unfortunately, no processes have been introduced that will allow us to pursue the necessary applications. The city of Polson provides safe drinking water to over 5,000 residents, representing a significant portion of the Flathead Reservation's population. Polson is committed to working with the FRWMB to ensure adequate water rights are obtained for the city's growing demand. However, at this time, I must implore the FRWMB to prioritize the development and implementation of processes that will allow the municipalities who provide water to the majority of the Flathead Reservation residents the opportunity to engage with the FRWMB and ensure adequate water is appropriated for our demands. Your attention to this is greatly appreciated. If helpful to this effort, I will make myself available to attend an upcoming meeting of the FRWMB to discuss this matter further. Likewise, if I can be of service to the FRWMB as it works through these processes, please do not hesitate to reach out to me via telephone or email. Respectfully, Ed Neese, City Manager, Polson, Montana.
Thank you, Ethan. Comments, questions? is a slightly different comment, so, question for the board is, do you want to respond? If so, it would be a suggestion to ask, our legal, support and, or a combination of legal and Ethan's office to recommend a draft for us, but that's an option, not required. We have it into the record, but if you want to respond, it's up to the board.
So, Mr. Chairman, question I have is, would this be kind of like in the same situation as, Finley Creek? As far as not having things in place so that Ethan can act on it? Sorry. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm back.
Mr. Chairman, Board Member McLeod, this is slightly different because this, the last public comment, I believe, was directly tied to an impending complaint to be filed with our office. This is different. This is still a complaint, but a complaint really more to the board about not having processes in place that would be for permitting and change. And so I believe that it is a different line of an issue in that we don't have enough material on the plate to even be discussing something that would perhaps impede the board's ability to objectively act as a judicial role, because they're complaining about processes more generally and not being in place yet. And so that would be how I would answer the question.
Thank you.
So I think it is very different.
Okay.
Okay, I guess, I guess this isn't unique to the city of Polson, and that there's at least 5 other water purveyors, municipalities out there that are in the same situation and awaiting this process to get implemented. And just those include Charlotte, Lake County Water and Sewer District, the Round Butte Water Company, City of Ronan, City of Polson, and the Tribal Housing Administration. They're in the same boat too, you know. So, and those, you know, this is the largest population or the largest amount of people that are served by potable water on the reservation. So, I mean, there's probably some bigger and maybe not water users such as irrigators, but you know, you add up all these municipal uses, it's pretty substantial. So I guess to me, that's probably why the city of Polson is wanting to find out where we're at on this, and because there's others standing in the wayside. So I guess to me, you know, we have the complaint process fairly well along, but we haven't even started the permitting and change process. So a while back, Ethan gave us a list of priorities. And so to me, this is one of those that maybe should get elevated to a higher ranking so that we start to get working on that permitting and change application process. So we could provide the Office of the Engineer a recommendation to do so if we wanted to. I guess that would be my suggestion.
Other comments?
I think Roger makes a good point.
And I would tend to agree that if that's what it takes to move this, is to elevate that in priority, we should do that. The question is, how and when do you want to do that? We could make a statement today if you'd like, and follow up with something specific at the next meeting. Indicate that we urge the staff to move this to a higher priority, and get back to us on, with a plan to do so.
Sure.
Ethan?
Stand before the board. That's all right. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, definitely agree with you, just to let you know where we're at on a couple of these items. Before we can do permits and changes, we need to have the water rights database buttoned up. And that has been a priority for us since day one. We've been well over half of our limited staffing ability trying to resolve the water rights database issue. The main topic that we've got there is that to manage public notice, which would be required for changes and new appropriations, we really have to have that tool in place. It will also help us to manage the other internal aspects of changes and permits. So for what it's worth, we have very much been trying very actively with Montana DNRC to get that resolved. Additionally, we do have a draft of adverse effects analyses, which are required for these that we're working on internally. We do look forward to getting board feedback about that once we've got those drafts a little bit better stood up. And so we've got some work towards permits and changes on that front. That said, happy to also receive another indicator that it is a priority. We already do recognize it as a priority. I do believe that this board has told us it was a priority previously. And for what it's worth, we're doing as best we can on that.
I guess, from what we heard last time, the virus was maybe out 6 months, is what I recall. That
June.
DNRC, June, so.
The MVP, the first tier.
So, yeah, so maybe only 3 months then, but I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't develop the process concurrently while we're waiting for the water rights database to get into effect, because then essentially maybe they'd come together at the same time.
Is that
Yeah.
an option?
Mr. Chairman, certainly, stepwise, that process will be drafting and moving WPMP information forward. And so, where we're at on pace of the WPMP is kind of driven by the board. And so, as WPMP moves forward, we will continue to add parts of that. The current priority list that we have for the WPMP is to get what's in there right now moved forward. And then the second step was to address the registrations, both the state-based and the tribal registrations, because of the timelines associated with those. And then we were thinking probably permits and changes would come there and after. There is this other issue, the flathead system compact water. All things have come to us as different priorities, and we certainly are doing what we can to simultaneously move things along. Now, an advantage of the flathead system compact water is it does dip our toe into some of the types of issues that we will also need to address in permits and changes. So stepwise, it could be an advantage to work through that, but I stand at the board's direction. So if you want us to skip over registrations and go right to permits and changes, we can do that.
Well, I guess Ben had his hand up back there too, so.
I'll wait until you're done with your comments.
I guess the registration thing, we had the presentation from Ben last meeting that the state was getting pretty close to being able to turn that over to the OE. And they could start working on that. But I was thinking that if we were gonna have a response letter to this Polson city manager, that if we did prioritize that, we could at least acknowledge that in a letter of response too, so to show that we're listening to the public's comment.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, if, just to also understand the state-based registration, we get almost 5 calls a week about those and where's my water right? Where are we at in that process? And so, I haven't come before the board with any, written comments, as most of those are smaller, comments given less formally to the office, but I do believe it's worth mentioning that that is another almost 3,000 folks, 27.
In terms of the state water,
The number of the state,
6,000.
6,000.
And did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to verify that with, when we're talking about this virus access, just for the boards, like for
Do you
nomenclature.
wanna come on up and
Yeah.
just make sure that. Thank you. But
Yeah, no problem. My name is Ben Uwaki, I'm the DNRC combat coordinator, and I guess one of the messages I want to say is like, for the board, when it comes to nomenclature, we're calling it the virus interface and not virus itself. And it's something big that they decided internally with IT, but, virus in and of itself is not only just like the interface of the database and where, people like OA or OE staff like, James and us would be able to access it, but also entails, all the recorded documents that are put in there. And so it's more of like a fully functioning system compared to what we're calling virus interface, which is what we're gonna be giving access to the board and.
But the timing is the question.
Well, yeah, and that's something that we've been working on internally, trying to figure out how to determine where those land, where the allotments are, or where the land is compared to where the water rights are. And that's been one of our biggest issues, is we've been trying to figure out whether we do that by a basin basis, or if we work internally with the OE in identifying where these allotments are, where these water rights are being allocated to.
Which means what for timing?
I mean, internally, it's a difficult process for me to like give a timeline. We're trying to figure out the best way to determine how these authorizations, how jurisdiction is doled out. And we have conflicting ideas right now, so we're trying to come to a solution.
Conflicting internally or conflicting between DNRC and the Office of Engineering?
Yeah. Is the latter.
Okay. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ben? Okay, so I'm listening to all of this and trying to. So we've got the database. And that's going to proceed. And we want to urge that proceeds expeditiously as everything else. And on the other hand, we have all of the various policies and procedures, which will include forms that we need to get done. My question on that is a couple of things. One, should we take another look at the details of those priorities? Look at exactly what they are. And if we need to rearrange those priorities, do that and get into some timelines on this. The timelines, though, for those are going to also mean potentially more time for the board to spend on it so that we can get them done. So, I think having said that, you throw it out there and ask how you would like to proceed, because that would be my thought and my suggestion, but and then when do we want to start that? Because I think it would mean having Ethan lay out, the steps for, you know, we're talking about current issues, registration, permits and changes, flooded system water. You know, there may be others, but where are we with each of those and how do we want to prioritize those and get them done? So this is kind of turned into a mini priority setting process here, but I think it's important. So
Yeah.
how would you like to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Georgia?
Well, I appreciate everybody's good input on this, and I agree. This is becoming increasingly important. I'm happy with taking a look at priorities and bumping this up. And if it means increasing our meeting schedule, I can make that happen from my end. I don't know what everyone else's is like. And just one side comment on this too, I have collaborated with Ed, with Mr. Neese on some concerns that the city has in the past in the role of a grant writer. And while I have not spoken to him recently about this, one of the expansions that the city is interested in with regards to these water rights deals with creation of affordable housing. So, which I think we can all agree is also another important need in our respective communities. So it's all urgent, right? Everything, it's all needed yesterday. I get it, but there's a nuance to that request that I think is important to consider.
Mr. Chairman, board members, as you embark on the discussion of priorities, I'll remind you that we had an initial list that was kind of drafted up from the strategic planning process. And it would be behoove, I think, all of us to let that priority setting mission interchange with that strategic planning process. So if however the board wanted to do it, we briefly discussed an idea of a committee or doing it as a group to just sit down and really look at the whole list of items, which is going to be tedious and detailed, but probably really needed and easy enough to add a column to help prioritize what the board sees as the main items to get done, and if we can incorporate that in that strategic planning process, that to me that makes sense as a vehicle to try to move things forward. And I'm not saying that the list that we had last time was everything that we are. Point is, we're building it fast as we can. To help identify all those loose ends, because there are multiple threads that have to move forward simultaneously.
There are priorities and then there are priorities. And so there are priorities that you have on your list that are really also largely going to be technical and administrative. What the board needs to do, I think, is look at what our priority process is for getting policies and procedures established and in place so that you can get your part done. And the public can be satisfied that we're accomplishing what we need to accomplish. So while we are moving forward, we have been moving forward for a couple of years and we've made great progress. Maybe the time has come that we step it up in terms of our processes for getting this done. So that's my suggestion. And if you all, yes, Roger.
So we did have a little discussion on that priority. I remember your priority list was pretty extensive. And there seemed to be a whole range of items identified on that thing that were from very small things to big picture things. And so, and we had discussed having a subcommittee to work on then doing some strategic planning and then bringing in the large ticket items. And So I guess maybe it's the time to decide on if we want to go that route. I know I had volunteered to be on that committee. If we want to have a subcommittee, if we're going to do it as a board, that's fine with me too. But I agree with Georgia also, and that, you know, I'm willing to put some extra time into the WPNP so that we can move things along a little faster.
So if we could have, I mean, let's just talk about committee structure for a second, how that, what we do and how do we do that? Let's say we form one, what's our top priority for that? What's our top priority for creating a committee? I mean, we'd have to start there because we'd want that committee to focus on something that we need as a board to take action on and advance it quickly enough and get it back to the board quickly so that we can get it done.
Yeah.
What would that be? And that's the question of what the priority is. We can do that or just do it as a board and sit down and start to hash this out. So either way works for me, but timing wise, but everyone needs to be on board so we can figure out what direction we're gonna go. So Roger had one suggestion. Any others?
I favor Roger's suggestion.
Okay,
I guess what I would envision is that 2 or 3 board members work with Ethan and probably James, since James was also instrumental in developing that priority list, you know, and now that Ethan's got more staff too, he can delegate other things. So
I just keep in mind, I think it's appropriate to think about that list of priorities, and there are maybe priorities that will be important for administration, but I think the board needs to have its priorities. We need to have our priorities square about what we need to start advancing and completing so that we can hand them off to Ethan so that they can implement them.
exactly.
So, Georgia.
Well, I just agree in terms of, do we do it by subcommittee or full board?
We've got a couple of suggestions for a committee, so your thoughts?
I'm fine with that. I think, in terms of setting up a task list for the board, there's some skill sets that we have here on the board that could really come up with that. And we can play to our strengths with that with the subcommittee. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Ken,
I think the focus subcommittee would be the way to go.
all right, let's create one right now. And decide if that committee should, and we should either decide what to focus on now or let the committee toss things around and figure out what the priority should be and make the recommendation to the board, so. Who's on the committee?
I'll volunteer to be on.
Roger? So we need at least 2.
I cannot be for the next 6 weeks.
Okay,
How long do
all right, for now, by consensus, we would establish a priority committee of the board to take a look at not only the strategic plan priorities that the Office of Engineer established, but policy priorities for the board so that we can decide what we want to take on and focus on and get done. And I'd say the board members, we need to be prepared to, if necessary, have more frequent meetings so that we can focus on these and get them done. That sound fair? I mean, I suggested by consensus, but if you want to do it with action, we can sure do that.
I'd like to do it with a vote, just so we're on the record of doing it.
Okay. All right, so let's hear a motion.
I'll make a motion to establish a subcommittee to establish priorities for the board and the Office of Engineer.
Motion by Ken. Comments, questions? Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Georgia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and so we have, Roger and George, if you will get us started.
George and I'll get together with Ethan and see, figure out a good date to meet. So. Go from there.
And I would say at your will, begin proposing times when the board needs to meet so that we can keep this moving.
Okay.
All right.
And most days will be okay with me as long as I know at least a day ahead of time,
Oh, okay.
so I can let them know at work.
All right, great. Well, maybe we can get out his calendar after the meeting and
Sure.
pick a day
Okay.
or break or whatever.
So that brings us through item number 2 on the agenda. So any other items for number 2 on the agenda? Was there anything else, Ethan?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, we will move on to item number 3, board business. We need to approve meeting minutes from April 23. So let's take a look at your meeting minutes from April 23.
Okay, this one is
Take,
not a meeting.
Comments, questions, changes, otherwise we take a motion to approve and ready.
No. How do I ensure the students?
I'm gonna mute Ken for a few minutes, and things like these.
He's back.
I was getting some technical help.
Well, we all need that from time to time.
Me more than most.
But when you're ready, unless there's comments, we need a motion to approve the minutes from April 23.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes for April 23.
Motion by George,
I'll
Second.
second.
second by Roger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. We have an item 3.2, employee climate check. Who has this? Community.
I can talk about it.
All right, Georgia.
So I think it was last October when Teresa Wall McDonald was still on the board. She shared with us as a board the idea of performing climate checks with all OE employees and gave us a list of proposed questions to ask. And if you take a look at what's been enclosed in your folder, the questions are scaled in terms of what you asked during the first 30 days of employment. So I'm staring at you right now, Sidney. And then you go on and you ask after 60 days and then after 90 days. And we had this on our agenda and then other things kind of bubbled up to the top as they do around here. And we didn't get back to this. And so Roger and I were chatting about it, and I just really feel from our standpoint as a board with new staff and more staff coming on, this is a good way to work with our employees and get great feedback from them, what's working, what's not, what can we do better. And this is a list of the questions that Teresa had drafted. I think these were similar to what she had been using at SKC. So that's what a climate check is. It's just a way to check in with staff and see how they're doing, get feedback.
Thank you. Comments, questions? How would this be implemented?
So as Roger and I chatted, we want to open this up to the board and get all of your good ideas and yours too, Ethan, as is for everybody. The thought was that 1 or 2 board members would meet with staff and just ask these questions and capture those responses. And then that would, I don't know if we need to discuss that as part of the personnel policy, if we did in the past. If so, someone can remind me. I'm not sure what's done with the captured responses, if they go in a personnel file, how that's handled. I'm sure we can revisit the notes, but that's the process. You capture the information and you just use that to help guide management decisions.
Okay, probably would be important to decide how we want to manage the actual documentation. Any comments, questions?
Chairman, I would agree with Georgia and that it should go into their personnel files, and this is a good check for all of us and also for the employee. I think it's a real good thing to do.
I could add something.
Yeah, sure.
I had put together a draft list too, only because I had lost this file. My external jump drive went belly up and I didn't have access to this. Anyway, I have that back now and we have this list. I think Roger, you can put this together. One of the things that I thought would be an important question to ask too is, how is the board doing, right? These questions are dealing with feedback from staff to supervisors, but I didn't see any questions on this list that really deal specifically with how are we as a board helping you, hindering you, what could we do better? And I felt it was only fair that we hold ourselves accountable as well. So.
Okay. So, let's start with the forms that are in front of us. And George's suggestion of adding that question. Do we want to finalize the form and then take action on the forms? Do we want to take action on this form with the amendment, with the addendum that George has suggested?
So I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So the amendment would go on each 30 days, 60 day, and 90 day.
Great question.
Each part.
I think it should.
Yeah.
Further question? So these are, is this the intention just to a climate of our newer employees? What happens after 90 days?
So when I was doing my research on climate checks or just employee kind of check-ins, they were not limited to a 90-day period. And I think Teresa's list was couched in that 90-day because that is the probationary period at SKC. But you bring up a great point. We do not have to limit this to a time period. It could be done every 6 months, right? With no time limit. Once a year. You don't want to be, obviously want to coordinate with you, Ethan, so that we're not impending or impeding any office flow of work. I don't anticipate these take a long time to do. In fact, you could even give the questions to staff in advance. They have time to think about them and type it up. There's different ways you can go about capturing the information. It could be usually what's recommended is a one-on-one person interview or an in-person interview. But I guess that's something else we could discuss as a group is what would be the most helpful way of providing feedback.
Okay.
I have a question.
I mean, first of all, these questions are already being asked in our office regularly. Not in this fashion, but there's lots of, you know, so. For what that, second, some of these, I wanna know, like, well, what are you gonna do? So. Are you happy you accepted this job? An employee says no. What does that give us? Other than now it's really awkward. And there's not, you know, the difference with our existing personnel policies and the evaluation process is that they have outcomes. And so, you know, there's performance standards, there's outcomes. This, I'm just a little more curious about, like, what happens with this information?
So there's two questions there. So the first one would be, if a person said they're not happy in their job, what would you do? And I think if it were me, I'd want to know why, right? Is that something that is resolvable or not? It could be, I hate the commute, right? Or I can't find an affordable place to rent. Or it's too cold in here, right? Or, you know, are there things that you can resolve? Can you kind of capture that if that is helpful? And secondly, it's what do we do with the records, right? And I think that's up for discussion, but it sounds like the group is comfortable, if I'm hearing you, right, putting this in as part of personnel records.
More comments?
I would think the follow-up comment to I'm unhappy would be what would make you happy?
I see so let me just throw a couple of thoughts / questions out. So we have our personnel process and policies, and the administration will take care of that. My impression is that this is meant for the board to capture this information and for the board to respond to it. Is that what you're thinking
I
behind
think
this?
the original premise, that's exactly right, Mr.
Okay.
Chair, that this was to give the board an idea of how staff is feeling.
Okay.
Um,
And so responses then, if one or two board members were to meet with a staff person, get your responses, and the responses would come back to the board.
I think that would be appropriate.
And given the nature of the questions, are we talking about things that are going to be done in confidence or in open sessions?
I think that might be affected by the nature of the responses.
Well, I'm thinking we should probably make a decision about how that is handled, because as a matter of practice for the entire thing, because
Mr. Chairman?
personnel, it begins to approach the personnel side of things, which I think is typically handled in a closed section. But that's why I'm asking the question. Yeah, Ken.
I'd be curious if Haley had any thoughts on this.
Has Haley seen these?
They were part of the materials that were distributed, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So Haley, Ken has had a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the content from this questionnaire, it would probably breach on the side of confidentiality. However, there is always the option to ask that individual if they consent to sharing that information in a public setting. It could also be done in more of a general sharing of information. So, you know, like a synopsis of what maybe some of the problems might be, or issues or concerns, and then maybe a synopsis of what some of the good things are that employees and staff are experiencing. So if you choose to share it that way, I think that might be a good approach.
So, and that's leaning toward what I was thinking, and in terms of the general sharing, if we kept it confidential, but there's general information that we might want to discuss with the board, maybe there's some issue we could discuss with the board without attaching it to a name. Because it's really the problem solving we're trying to get at, not trying to deal with, because Ethan is going to have the personnel side of this. Well, this is related to personnel, and I think begins to go on to the personnel side, requiring confidentiality. If we're going to do this, we should probably be clear about how we're going to do it. That's all I'm thinking. Otherwise, I'm game. I like the idea, sitting down and talking with employees. I mean, sounds simple. We just want to sit down and talk with employees on one hand. On the other hand, if we're going to capture it, put it into a record, we want to be careful about how we do this in a way that's also sensitive to those confidentiality. Plus, if employees know we're handling it that way in a confidential manner, you're likely to get more free flow of information.
Mr. Chairman, let's ask something else.
Yes.
I'd be curious if any of the Office of Engineers employees had any thoughts on this.
Sure. Well, while we're talking about it, so Ethan and or staff, anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions?
I think it's a nice idea to have. If we could keep it so that it doesn't take up a ton of time, I think that would be helpful for everyone. And then on the confidentiality side of things, yeah, I think having a clear explanation of where the information is going to go is going to be important for getting the most reliable responses. If that's what you're looking for, just, explain to the staff how the information will be used and who will be shared with. It's important.
Anyone else? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it would be important to err on the side of confidentiality. And like James said, to let the employee know prior.
Yeah, good. Ethan.
I'm just gonna go through, but I will, caution the board to recognize that you just embarked on spending more time on the policy pieces and then also picking up other things. There's only so much.
I get it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Let's to the board. So anyway.
I think this is as important as the policy thing, because we want to retain employees and not have to hire new employees, or have employee turnover, and keep employees happy. And so I think it could go a long ways toward that, So I'm not an HR person, but I see some benefit to it, and I see some benefit in the confidentiality side of it, so that there's an openness to it to participate. But yet it can help us help the board direct the office of the engineer ultimately too. So
I think the communication is important, and I think it gives us feedback enough so that we can be helpful. I think what we want to do is, I think early on in the process, we always talked about how do we be successful. This is going to help us continue to be successful if we do it right. So let's go to the form. So the suggestion was that we would add a question. And you want to phrase that question? Probably pretty simple, but.
Sure, so I can send everybody what I had in my other email. In fact, I think I did send an email to everyone. If memory serves, the question was, how has your interaction with the board helped you do your job, or how has it hindered? right, just try to capture some of that feedback.
I would call that a leading question.
Okay, well, I'm just doing this from a very bad memory right now,
What's the
so,
source of
okay,
that?
we're back to.
So given that, do you want to take a shot at revising the form?
Yes, yes,
Okay, and then bring it back so that we can take action on it and say, can we improve that? Okay, that would be step one. Another thought here would be, you go 30, 60, 90, and the question came up, what after 90, do we want to go with 30, 60, 90? Do we want to have one or two? Do we have an open-ended one, or all of the above? Because, you know, there might come a time when you want to do something like this with employees who have been here for a while, like you think.
Well, and that's what I was thinking too. Do we wanna change the duration on these to maybe quarterly or something semi-annually, something to that effect?
The way that's set out now, is to measure how well you onboarded.
All right,
At 30, 60, 90, and then it just ends, and so. Which I think is important, that we onboard our employees in the most healthy way possible. But we're also interested in our experience of our long-term employees, so maybe this becomes a once-a-year deal for beyond that. Or every 6 months or something.
So do this. Plus. After that, after 90 days, then it just becomes once a year.
Yeah.
Is that what you're suggesting?
I think so, at least once a year.
once a year.
Okay. I mean,
And
that's,
to me, it would be not aligned with your performance evaluation. Because the two are separate. We may talk about many of the same things, but to me, the importance of this is you're gauging the health of our organization. And you'd want to do that not at the same time you're doing a performance evaluation, if that makes sense.
right.
You know, maybe you do this in the middle of the year versus at the end of the year when you're doing performance evaluations, because we want the ability to adjust to help the organization adjust with the feedback that we get.
To do this that way, then we would probably, well, not probably, we would need, gets to my second or maybe third step here is, it would be 30, 60, 90, and then a year, once a year after that. So we'll just say that we concur with that. Okay, and then we would need another committee. Couple people to agree that they're going to do this.
I'd be happy to volunteer.
Okay.
I would, instead of 30, 60, 90, I think the board should consider 60, 90. Give somebody 2 months to get in the job, you know, and cut down. Because during those first 2 months, there's a lot expected already for an employee to get orientated. And just that's my suggestion, and I think the 1 year interval is appropriate.
So 60, 90, so that's a suggestion. How do you feel about that?
I think that's great. I feel really good. And I think it's important too, I appreciate Ethan that you are checking in with your staff. I think I shared with Roger. I've never had one of these in my whole professional career. And I would have welcomed that. And I think too, while you're checking in frequently, and that's awesome, we don't get to do that with you guys. And so, we find these wonderful people, and we never get to sit down and chat with them. So this will give us that opportunity, and I'm happy to make some changes to this and get it back out to the board for review.
Okay, and so maybe by the next meeting, we will have something to act on. Did you have something, Ethan?
Well, based on what Georgia just said, you know, instead of having these conducted by a committee, I really think it would be a good idea if the board just held an executive session with these, you know, for all the employees on, you know, trying to get things kind of in alignment. Maybe you could do multiple ones at the same time, if there could be some flexibility in the timelines a little bit, but that that would enable the entire board to hear that feedback, just thinking out loud. Maybe that wasn't the vision. I don't wanna, impede, some other vision that might be,
No, I think the question is whether we do a committee or full board, same as the other, so. Thought,
Well, it's interesting you bring this up, Ethan. I actually looked this up and it can be intimidating for some people
That's what I
to
thought.
sit in front of
full
a
board.
body of
Yeah.
us, even though we're very nice. It can be intimidating, so the recommendation was to keep it to a smaller group of people, but you're being efficient. I hear what was underneath that question. But that was,
Okay.
kind of the guideline.
So we have gone that far and we have one volunteer. Any other volunteers for that?
I'll try to help out Georgia on this too.
You sure?
Yeah, I'll see how it goes.
You're a busy guy.
Okay. So based on that and our previous discussion about taking action and formalizing it, do you want to take action on creating that committee?
Yes.
So I need a motion so that we can take action on it.
Mr. Chair, I move that we create a committee to develop and perform climate checks for OE staff.
Motion by Georgia,
I'll second.
second by Ken, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and at this point, committee will currently be Georgia and Roger. And by next meeting, you'll bring back a updated form so that we can take a look at that with thoughts about whether or not we go with 30, 60, 90 or 60, 90 and then following that annual. So, yeah. All right. Anything else on that, Georgia? Yes?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
George, Roger, Ken, anything?
Nope.
Any more? Okay. All right. Very good, guys.
Mr. Chairman, just a heads up, I'm gonna have to leave the meeting here in 10 minutes.
Hey. There any particular, let's see, I think we'll have enough for action if we need to, right? Yeah. Okay, all right. We are at development allowance presentation, water engineer. Item number 4.
Mr. Chairman, board members. Things getting set up here. Double checking sharing your screen, right, Mr. Craig's?
So, I get a thumbs up. You guys can see this.
Thank you.
Would you like it in presentation mode?
Please, that'd be great. Thank you. Well, this is the topic, and we're gonna talk about domestic allowances. So we've talked about it a little bit before, but we're gonna take a slightly different approach. So what I'm gonna present to you today is some background information that's gone into where we're at today. A first item that was over a year ago was a memo from Seth Makepeace. That memo had a lot of good information in it. I'm not going over all of it, but I have identified a couple of key points that came out of that memo. The first one is that connections of development domestic allowances should be limited to DEQ minor subdivision standard, which is 5 or less homes and or businesses. Second one was that all exempt uses should be considered combined toward a maximum of 10 acre-feet. And the third one was that the OE should manage phase development to maintain standards regardless of timing of development. We also had a white paper that was provided by legal counsel, and it had some key information presented there as well. And namely that the ordinance allows for a maximum of 10 acre-feet, that each well is limited to 35 gallons per minute or less, that existing permit exceptions and new domestic allowances may be combined toward that maximum calculation. Any combination exceeding 10 acre-feet would require a permit, and that parcel size has not been a part of the discussion yet. We also have offered DNRC information, exempt well information, in that all subdivisions are limited to 10 acre-feet regardless of the parcel size. Parcels that are larger than 20 acres have historically been limited to 10 acre-feet unless other exempt wells can be spaced a minimum of a quarter mile away. Exempt well lawsuits have typically been due to an exceedance of 10 acre-feet, typically through phase developments. We had some clarification about the ordinance language, that the maximum flow rates of 35 GPM are not cumulative and instead limited to each well. I think that that was important enough to put in this presentation.
Yeah.
We had a meeting here at this office that had board member Pitt, board member Noble, Vice Chair Noble, excuse me. We had legal counsel, Seth, Amanda, with tribes here. We discussed things. These were what we had as a takeaway, I think, from that meeting. Of course, the vice chair, happy to have him speak into this if he wants to. Clarification that no existing water rights are being taken away. Went through that. Consensus that we should consider all existing permit exceptions. Recognize a permit may be required when exceeding 10 acre-feet. That we should maintain some sort of DEQ major minor subdivision principle, which is 5 or less parcels or homes / businesses. And at that meeting, there was an assignment made to the water engineer and staff to draft recommendations, and that those recommendations would avoid risk of litigation, promote ability to administer and track the ordinance intent. So here at the Office of the Engineer, we put our heads together. This did include the legal counsel input, and we identified these 9 kind of essential things that we needed to get addressed in order to move forward. We needed to fix the loophole, which you've heard about. We needed to determine procedures for adding exempt wells towards setting a maximum 10 acre-foot volume. We needed to define, what are the permit exceptions that we're going to consider. Better define development closely versus adjacent. Address phase development. Determine parcel size options for developments. Address RV pads. Clarify water measurement mandates and clarify site for businesses. Domestic allowance solutions. So number one, how do we fix the loophole, which was the opportunity for folks to put 9 houses on 3 wells. We have come up with language that changes the maximum number of individual and or shared allowances within a development, individual parcel or among parcels sharing a well as 3. And that amongst those 3, they could use any combination of individual or shared wells, meaning they could use 3 individual wells, they could use 1 shared well amongst 3, or they could use 1 individual well and 1 well shared amongst 2. And that solves the loophole.
Let's, any questions? Let's just make sure we go through this, any questions, comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am just steamrolling ahead.
That's all right. That's all right. No, yes, I appreciate it. But at this point, now that you're starting on solutions, let's see if anybody has any questions.
I have a question, but it's not about the slides, if I may.
Go ahead.
Ethan, is this something you can, I guess, print off these slides, print off and send this to us so we can sit there and read it at home or kind of.
It is included in the materials that were posted on the website.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a link in both the draft agenda and the calendar event. But certainly, we can help you with that, Ken, however you need to receive it.
That'll work.
Okay.
Any questions on this particular one? So if this is suggested language, solution for fixing the loophole, I can read your language. What does it mean?
Mr. Chairman, board members, just to let you know that this is a presentation about what we think we've identified the problems and what we think we should do. And then the updated WPMP that you have actually has these edits to it. And so when we were directed to make a recommendation, we are absolutely, we're not only limiting it to this discussion topic, we have drafted the language in the WPMP that will be available to review under item 5, Mr. Chairman. Where we have the specific language. A lot of it does track the slides. Obviously, for the slides purposes, we try to do some summary, a little less, less legalese where I could, but
That's fine. It's just the language here. So fix the loophole. Remind us exactly what the loophole is.
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The loophole is that the board early on, with my help, when I was a DNRC hydrologist with Seth's help, we identified that there was a need to set a maximum number of individual and or shared domestic allowances before something would be considered to be a development domestic allowance. And the board said 3 individual or shared wells may be used before something is determined to be a development domestic allowance, which has, of course, the requirement of water measurement, or if it exceeds that standard of permit. And when we made that recommendation to the board previously, we did not realize that there would be opportunity for someone to put in, I'll remind the board here that a shared well can be used on at least 2, but not more than 3 homes and or businesses. And in the case of limiting things to 3 individual and or shared wells, we inadvertently opened the door opportunistically. Somebody being able to put in 3 shared wells on a parcel that would be connected to 3 homes each, which is 9, and exceeds what any of the board members conveyed to us as an appropriate maximum limit.
Okay. Any other questions?
And Mr. Chairman, just also to tie it back to this, sorry, I drifted off my head. What we've really done here is just gone from 3 individual and or shared wells to 3 individual and or shared domestic allowances, meaning 3 total homes and or businesses with any combination of wells, which I think was closer to the intent originally, but
Okay. If there are no more questions, we'll move on. Sure, there'll be more later. Okay.
all right, item number 2, determine procedures for adding permit exceptions or setting the maximum 10 acre foot volume. In this situation, within a development, individual parcel or among parcels sharing a well, all water rights issued as permit exceptions, and you'll notice that that's capitalized. We're going to get to a definition of permit exceptions. Will be considered as part of the total additive maximum annual diverted volume for all permit. Whoops. there might be a bit of a type there, but I think you probably get the idea is that, in this case, what we're really alluding to is that we're gonna add up everything within, a individual parcel or among parcels sharing a well or within a development for any of these, capital permit exceptions to add things up to 10 acre feet. And just for a clarification, this would include pre-effective date and post-effective date permit exceptions that we'll help define here in a second. And that to help folks needing to wiggle around, we will offer an applicant the ability to request that we consider reducing the volume of an existing permit exception in order to avoid exceeding the maximum annual volume limit of 10 acre feet for any new domestic allowances that they might want to install.
Comments, questions? So it's my thinking that this addresses the lengthy discussion we had last meeting. This is
the recommendation to address the lengthy discussion that we had last meeting. In addition to the permit exception definition there, like I said, we'll get to.
Yeah. All right. Roger, what are you thinking? Because I know this kind of goes in one direction and we were thinking we would go one direction or the other. This proposes a direction for Roger, Ken, Georgia.
As folks are thinking, Mr. Chairman, I will offer that this particular recommendation is specifically targeting an avoidance of litigation that we've seen across the rest of the state. That is, if you want to know why that's in there, that is what we determined to be the more conservative approach given existing precedent.
Mr. Chairman, I need to leave before I think my preference would let Ethan continue on with his presentation, and I would really like to think about what I'm seeing as he's put a lot of work into this, and I just like to really sit down by myself and think about it and see if there are any problems with it.
That's fair. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm not going to turn off my laptop because I'm actually proctoring a midterm, but I'm going to be not on the screen a fair amount of the time. If you need me to come back for a vote or something, call me on my cell phone.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I don't mean to slow us down, but Ken, his suggestion is we just get through the presentation. You guys good with that?
Yeah.
All right. All right.
All right, so what we've done here is we've embarked on defining what permit exceptions are for, for these WPMTs, okay? And this is not trying to reach out across the external boundaries of the Flathead Indian Reservation. This is for our purposes of implementing the ordinance, okay? And so the first item would be groundwater certificates developed on or after May 17th of 1991 under a DNRC Form 602. Okay, and so those are either active or they got pushed into category 2. Okay, in the 1991 date, you were like, what? Why 1991? That's because prior to May 17th, 1991, the statute on these types of groundwater certificates was different, and those and we'll get to that more in item 4. So if you bear with me here, I will do a better job explaining that. In the meantime, I'm gonna go right into item 2, which are state-based registrations pursuant to ordinance. In this case, I am recommending that we exclude exceptions that are limited to stock purposes and water uses predating July 1, 1973. And the reason for that is that, one, the stock exceptions that are out there are particular and needed for the reservation in relation to possible changes to the irrigation project through betterment, and also are not determined to really be a substantial additive issue from what we see in the database. The July 1, 1973. First of all, I will apologize because I do know sometimes we interchange the word permit exceptions and exempt wells, but the reality here is that there was really only one type of exempt use, and they were a type of pre-73 use in which a water user didn't have to file anything, meaning that's a true exemption. In contrast to a permit exception, which means that an applicant can still actually very much have to file something like a domestic allowance or a 602. It's just really that they were accepted from the major requirements of a permit for determining, proving that they're not going to cause adverse effect. They get to avoid a public notice requirement that a permit has, a few other things, but those are the highlights. We recommend excluding those pre-73 uses because they're not organized or prolific enough to really, they're just going to confuse us, frankly.
So are you using exceptions synonymous with exemptions then? I'm not following your language there.
Sometimes, yes. And in this case, we are, I'm just making a clarification that sometimes those terms get cross-used, but truly an exempt use is really a pre-73, right? And what we really need to do is retrain ourselves here to really consider these to be permit exceptions. Does that help, Mr. Vice Chairman?
Well, no.
So the permit exceptions could be an example.
In this case, I'm saying excluding pre-73 exemptions. So no, a permanent exception in this case would not include an exemption.
Okay.
But nothing is exempt on the reservation after the effective date. So that's why the registration process included a mandate to register any pre-1973 domestic or stock direct from source, which were the two exemptions that were offered, that you had to actually come in and register those if you hadn't already filed in the general stream adjudication through like House Bill 110.
Claims.
Yes, sir.
So getting back to my question though, an exemption, the way the state looks at it is all of those 602s is an exempted water right.
They sometimes call them that. They really are not exempt water rights. They are permit exceptions. Because you have to file, and if you don't file, it would be a violation of the Montana Water Use Act. So they're not exempt from filing. They're permit exceptions.
There were, and if I remember right, it's been a while, there were water uses that could be made at a certain time that didn't require any filing.
Those are the pre-73 exempt rights, yes.
And that
Exempt
was
from file.
exempt from filing unless you're filing it as a claim. Meaning if I have claims or it was exempt. Or exempt from filing, period.
And outside of the reservation boundaries, Montana offered several late claim filing opportunities
Yeah.
to file the exemptions.
Yeah,
If you wanted to get a water right, because you don't have a water right, and you don't have a right to continued use for an exempt use, however. Across the rest of the state, you weren't required to file. So you can still have an exempt use outside of the reservation boundaries for domestic or direct from source stock that predates 1973 that you didn't have to file for. In contrast, the compact did not provide for any continuation of exemptions within the reservation boundaries. Therefore, during the registration process, if you hadn't already filed with the general stream adjudication, you had to follow up with filing with the NRC for state-based registration to the compact.
so within the reservation, if there are pre-73 uses that they hadn't filed on as a claim, they don't have a water right.
That is accurate.
And
They
if
don't
they
have
want,
the
if they
authority
want
to-
something, they've got to reapply with us.
Well, yeah, and that's the way it is across the state too. But, so I think it's kind of a matter of semantics in that the 602s were called exempt water rights because they were exempt from the formal permitting process. And so
And you'd get a certificate.
you get a certificate, yes. So really, like number 3 thing should say really exceptions. It shouldn't say define DDA exceptions.
What's that?
Shouldn't number 3 heading really say define DDA exceptions? Because we're not doing permits yet.
No, we're just defining all permit exceptions that would be considered towards this 10-acre-foot cap. This is these 4 categories. When we do an assessment on either an individual parcel or a proposed development or parcel sharing a well, you know, these 4 types of uses, the annual volume would go into that maximum 10-acre-foot annual volume cap that we've determined as needed. And anytime that you have an exceedance of that 10-acre-feet threshold, that's when this office would require a permit or other type of adjustment of the proposed uses.
Okay.
Let me restate what I just thought I heard you say, that they are included. Or they're not included.
The only thing that's excluded here, and it's probably just the way that it's brought forward, it is complicated, by the way, so in any explanation we're gonna provide is gonna seem complicated. So right here, we say state-based registration pursuant to ordinance, right? Well, in the ordinance, there are 3 types of state-based registrations. The ones that everybody thinks of as the Form 602, right? Then there's the stock Form 605, and then there is the pre-73, which are limited to stock direct from source and limited to domestic uses, okay? And we're saying we're gonna consider all of the state-based registrations, excluding the stock and the pre-73 stock. So it's really trying to limit things to those 602s that you see here, okay? So we're gonna include everything but that because state-based registrations include 3 categories and we're excluding 2 of those categories. It definitely, you could argue that there's a better way to present that.
Well, I don't, maybe this is where, because your title says define exceptions, so you are including some and not including others
Yeah,
within exceptions,
we are,
so that not everything is exception.
that's true. For capital P, capital E, for the purposes of our policies.
If you're defining exceptions, item number 1 shouldn't be there. That's not an exception, you're including it. Did I hear you right?
That is a type of exception.
If I may,
Please.
Yeah, we need some
Did
clarification.
I
Yeah, I'm struggling too.
state-based registration pursuant to
So-
ordinance excluding,
let me try and simplify it kind of down into everyday terms. We're trying to make a list of things that we're going to consider when we're looking at developments and doing this 10 acre-feet combined maximum annual volume. This is just a list of the things that we are gonna look at to consider in the developments. And a permanent exception is, we need to define that because we're looking at only permanent exceptions for the development, right? So these are the list of water right forms that we are going to consider. And it's confusing because we have to exclude certain uses like stock uses and statements of claim, things like that. And so that's why it's confusing, but just kind of to wrap your head around it, this is a list of things that we are going to consider for the developments. That helps.
did that help?
Yeah, sort of.
I. All right, you're including groundwater certificates in your consideration.
Correct.
Yes.
Then why is it called an exception?
Because what we are including in the 10 acre-feet is all of the permit exceptions. That's the title of this category.
Because if you had a water right for 10 acre-feet that went through the regular permitting process, that's not on this list. Because that would have gone through the public notice. You know, like if you had something that was issued as a DNRC permit, it would have gone through the public notice procedures, and it doesn't amount to one of these, you know, up to 10 acre-feet allowances or permit exceptions.
It just seems the disconnect that we may be having is the terms inclusion and exception are the exact opposite. But I get what you're doing and I appreciate your explanation. I get it now.
All right, well, we'll keep going. We can come back to it also. Item 3, those are the things that we are actively processing here in the office. The individual shared or development domestic allowances. So in other words, if you had an active groundwater certificate under a 602 on your parcel, you apply for a new individual development domestic allowance. You would add these two maximum, these two diverted annual volumes together to ensure that it's not exceeding 10 acre-feet. And if it's not complicated enough, let's talk about item 4. Item 4 are groundwater certificates, which predated May 17th, 1991. They were issued by the Montana DNRC for up to 100 gallons per minute and without a volume. You can understand why this quickly gets hard for us to manage, and what it actually means. We have determined in this case that the OE will just have to handle those on a case-by-case scenario, determining an appropriate method for incorporating these exceptions, because they are not, it's not so uniform that I can give you a cookie cutter approach to what to do with those.
I forgot there was a period of time they were at 100. Yeah,
Yeah,
and they dropped it.
with no volume. So they were limited to the use. Typically, if the record is clear enough, we can typically figure out what that volume standard was, but that's not always the case. And so that's why we have a little bit of an open end there.
How many other?
I have the spreadsheet, and we're still dialing in the exact parameters, but it was significant enough to put item 4 on here. Right. So, guys, the first thing I was like, do we even need to talk about that? Is there 7? You know, no, there's more than 7. That's why I did believe we need some kind of like policy recognition that, we're gonna look at them. I can't tell you exactly how we're gonna factor it in because they are so complicated that, it's just not I can't give you that exact answer, until we look at each file. The standards were not uniformly applied.
Yeah, and it was quite a period of time when it was allowed. I think it started in 79 and 79 or 80.
Well, yeah, I mean, technically it was anything that, came after. So, July 1st of 1973 is when, that transition happened from the statements of claim to permits. So from the Montana Water Port Authority to the Montana DNRC, because that's when the department was created. And there was a substantial shift in the water administration across Montana. That shift started off with the recognition that there needed to be these permit exceptions for small domestic wells. There was less people, more water. All right, as long as it doesn't exceed 100 gallons per minute, you're good to go. Up until, 1991, where it was determined that was perhaps a little too flexible. We'll try to move on to the next. Yep, no.
Just a quick
Sorry.
question. So this language will go into the WPMP, or
Yes, and we have drafted this language, and it's in the WPMP, which you'll get to review next, the like actual details. This is to try to give you an overview of the 9 problems that we determine you need to solve and the solutions that we are recommending.
so my thought was, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just thought, since some of this confused us and there'll be boards in the future, is it appropriate to add a little bit of additional language, maybe under 3 defined permit exceptions? The following permit exceptions are included in OE review. Would that be helpful? Did I capture that correctly?
But I think clearly we do need to offer something like that, and we'll, let's make sure that we handle that in the actual definition that's in the WPMP, where, we can go from, kind of talking about it here to like, let's actually, that would be, I think, the spot to memorialize your good idea. And we did, anticipate this recommendation being brought to this board in an interactive, because we've worked with you before. An interactive format, so.
Maybe that gets to partly, you had a suggestion about the title. What were you wanting to add?
Well,
Because
you have.
maybe it's just dawning on me, you're talking about defined permit exceptions. These are exceptions the state made, and we're just including them.
That's an exception the state made. This is an exception that we're making. Because these are the ones that we're currently, there's over 500 of these that we've.
Maybe, and maybe that's where I was getting hung up, is trying to understand, you're talking about exceptions the state made. And then you're also including in the process exceptions we're making. And that part's not clear. Yeah,
We should make this permit exceptions a more unique term to this process.
And that's.
I wish I'd have thought of that,
No, that's okay. I just, is that what you were trying to get to? Because that's where I was. Because it wouldn't be just state, I'm slow, but I'm getting there. I get it. All right.
Yeah, I'm still struggling, but keep going.
All right, we need to better define development. We had this discussion, we gave you schematics of parcels. We said, what is closely grouped versus adjacent? What we've done here is we're gonna just say for the definition of development, closely or closely grouped, will mean those parcels with boundaries that are physically connected by edge to edge, corner to corner, or edge to corner. Separations of boundaries resulting from public land easements, such as road rights of way are discounted as separations of those boundaries. So we've really taken away anything where there's, maybe there's two parcels that are close but not touching. Those are just gonna be considered separate for purposes of this, because we do need a very defined determination. In this case, we're saying if they're not touching, they're not part of each other. So this does include corner to corner, but not any kind of other separation. If you have a parcel and it's got a highway through it, that doesn't mean you have two parcels. That makes sense. Look at me, Roger, like I'm crazy.
Well, so if you have a parcel on one side of the road and a parcel on the other side of the road, then you're saying that those are connected?
Yes.
Or
Well,
no, I thought it-
if it looks like a square like this, and then there's a road through it like that, we don't think of those as two parcels for purposes of.
You don't think of
We
those?
do not.
Okay.
We think of them as one parcel, the boundaries are lined up, right? So think of a square and put a road through the square.
That's a separate, that road is it could be a platted road. It's owned by the county, it's owned by the state, it's owned by the federal government. There are cases where there's easements across those situations, but that is a legal boundary.
So if we're not saying it's not a legal boundary, we're saying.
I mean,
for purposes of
it's a
combining-
legal property that is owned by a different entity. A road, a right of way, it could be a 60-foot right of way, it could be a 100-foot right of way. Could be owned by the federal government. That's a separate parcel. I think you get challenged on that, I'm afraid. Land surveyors would certainly challenge you on that.
Okay, so we can make that modification if you'd like to in the WPB.
Well, I think I'm just,
But I mean, we're not saying that they're the same for any purposes other than we should combine those two purposes of calculating the total permit exceptions. That's the only meaning of that last sentence. I meant to buy a whiteboard by now. I don't have it, so I can't draw
yeah,
the picture, but
I get what it says. But do you want to have, or should you have the flexibility to determine those situations on a case by case basis?
just
Because
counted this.
I think there might be real simple situations that you've just described that you could count it as one parcel. There may be situations that have different facts that you can't count it as one parcel. I can't give you an example, but I'm just thinking out loud here.
okay. Imagine this is a 10-acre parcel. And it's got a highway that goes through.
Well, there's two pieces right there. There's the
Yeah,
highway
two
up and down.
pieces with the road right between it.
This is a highway.
Yeah,
It's 5 acres and this is 5 acres under the same ownership. Okay, the 10-acre foot development domestic allowance applied for here. The 10-acre foot development domestic allowance applied for here. Question is, do you consider these to be conjoined for purposes of setting that 10-acre foot annual standard, or are these separate? Does that help to at least, we recommended that public road land easements not separate these for purposes of multiple 10-acre foot standards. This board gets to redirect this though when we get to the WPMP. We're happy to change that.
If you go on cadastral and click on that road and it shows that it's owned by the state of Montana or the federal government, then that's a separate ownership.
But
If you go on it,
That's why the sentence is there.
but I guess what you're telling me though is you're considering those as one parcel.
Closely grouped.
Or consider that exactly closely grouped.
But in this case, they don't touch. So how are you? So I guess I'm not following it, Ethan.
Well, I mean, they're separated by the highway, but.
Yeah.
The survey would show they touch.
No, the survey would show
Well, it
they
shows
do
an
not
easement
touch.
On top of that ownership.
Well, if there's an easement that runs through there and then they touch, yes. But if there's a survey and they're defined,
And they surveyed it out.
and that highway is a defined parcel, then they don't touch. Is what I'm saying.
So you're talking the highway is its own
It's
ownership,
a legal property,
not an easement.
right? It's a legally defined property. You'll be the
So this is still,
ask this guy right here. He's a planner.
this is still accurate though, right? I mean, because he uses the word easement.
Separation of boundaries on public land easements. Well, I guess if you follow the strict definition of the word easement, are discounted as separations. I'm not sure what are discounted as separations of those boundaries. What does that mean?
That means that these would be considered the same.
That an easement is not a divider.
Okay,
So then if you just add an additional sentence together at Roger's point, would that be helpful? Just to say, state highways or federal roads would create a legal separation into two parcels, or however you'd want to word that.
yeah, I guess I just didn't understand your language, so, but
the scenario though, I mean, that's where I'm at is, so the scenario in terms of development. If they're one unit versus two, so describe how that would look.
2 units means there's 10 acre feet and 10 acre feet. 1 unit means there's 10 acre feet amongst the whole thing.
There you go. So if it's separate, then they've got the ability to do twice.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think we'll move.
And again, they have to be on the same ownership.
Yep, should we?
Okay,
Yep.
so
I
I mean,
just-
that's a substantial
just
part of that equation.
struggling with the language. I
Just the
guess.
language, yeah, so
Yeah.
should we, if there are suggestions for making the language sound clearer for us, we can do that. Ken suggested we get through the presentation and get this out to us so that we can get you some feedback. So it's, any other comments on this one right now?
Well, I would guess my comment would be then just that such as a road right away is not connected or is connected then, or such a is considered a connected. Or, yeah, it just needs cleaned up. That last part of that sentence needs cleaned up.
So it's.
We're not
because-
gonna capture it here because this is the presentation. We can capture that when
Yep.
we get to
Yeah,
the actual drafting part. So, just make a note. And, if you think of better language between, now and then, that'd be great.
It's just that it's almost like reading a double negative. By saying are discounted means you're actually including it. So.
Our discounted is separations, yes.
Yeah.
So our,
Yeah. Georgia,
Yes, can we take a 10-minute break?
I was gonna get there. If you're ready, then let's do it. Yeah, so let's take
good
10-minute
spot.
break.
sounds good, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Thank you, George.
Ditch off the hot seat for a second there.
Okay.
heard you're looking for us. We're here. All right, we're back from break. And we are on domestic allowance solutions. And we've been discussing this closely group versus adjacent. So are we done with that? Do we got more comments? Okay, we're done with that. Number 5.
All right, address phase development. So DNRC did take an approach on how to handle this with picking a date and saying, okay, everything that was split prior to this will be considered, unique parcels. This is absent the issue we have with developments and their adjacent nature. Under the state for affiliated ownerships. What we're suggesting here is that to address phase development, we look at the parcels in existence as of September 17th, 2021, as like setting the stage for, this is the known area. That's when the compact became effective. And that any divisions, separations, family transfers, whatever, after that date, we would still look to the exterior perimeter that was in existence at the time of September 17th, 2021 as the starting point.
So would it, would it be better if we just hold our comments and add them into the presentation rather than introduction? Would that be the best use of time?
I stand at your preference.
Well, I'm thinking if we have initial comments, we should do it, but I think we're gonna do more follow-up after this anyway, so we don't know. Go ahead.
So I'm just thinking, would it help clarify this a little bit? Any subdivision boundary that existed after September 17th, 2021. It's just the word boundary is throwing me. Using the September 17th, 2021 boundary. But you're referring to the boundary of the development after that date. I'm just thinking if we could insert some language there to kind of clarify that.
That part of things on the wordsmithing, we definitely will, we should probably handle that when we do the draft.
Okay, I can.
If that's
I'll
okay,
play with
but
it.
conceptually, if it doesn't make sense, this would be a good time to ask you more about the concept.
Right, okay, I got the
And
concept. All
the
that.
states, I can't remember the state's date, but it's earlier than September 17th. Here, job was backdraft. It was I don't know how to look for back and forward purposes of our district.
That's fine. Do you have an example? Louis? I mean.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So if somebody had a 20-acre lot at on September 17th, 2021. And then they took that 20-acre lot, and they split it into in a half, 2 10s. Forget the numbers. Into 2 10s on a year after that time, and they put a couple houses on there, and then 5 years down the road, they take those 2 10, one of those 2 10s, and they divide it into 5 more pieces. We would look at everything within that original 20 to determine the 10-acre-foot limit. So, the phase development will be, first they went to 2 10s, and then they went to, one of those 10s went into 5s, right? And so that would be how we would look at avoiding phase developments. We do need to do something along these lines to avoid what seems to be happening, in terms of the phased issue and litigation. Does that help, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, with regards to appropriate in existence as of September 17th, 2021. How do you handle those after September 17th, 2021?
There's a couple ways. We'll probably ultimately incorporate that into a GIS exercise where we keep an active layer from September 17th of 2021. But anytime property is split or changed, there is records of those splits and changes that are available.
And you use those boundaries, whatever they were originally.
Not so much original, whatever they were
After
on September 17th of 2021.
Yeah.
So not
Okay.
now before that time or something, but at that time.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So here we had some discussion about, parcel size, and this is gonna get a little bit of a tricky conversation because, I'm gonna do a little comparison with what the state does and talk about what we think, might be a good idea. We do have a suggestion. It is a 40-acre parcel size, but I want to help to inform this. So I mentioned 2 things about how the state handles the situation. First of all, under the state arrangement, and which is very actively changing. They have the state of Montana is quickly trying to respond to the situation with the lawsuit, and they haven't released any more formal guidance, but they have put a pause on some things. Anything that might, be akin to the situation that was involved with combined appropriations and the active lawsuit, they've put a pause on that. I think is without being an official state spokesperson, I'll say that. But so what we're doing here is trying to figure out, well, what makes sense. And as the board will remember, we suggested that large landowners would be bearing a disproportionate encumbrance of these allowances as compared to small parcel owners, right? Because you got 80 acres, you'd be limited to the same 10 acre feet, under the ordinance, which is silent on that topic, as would a small 4-acre parcel, right? So that seemed like a little unfairness. We recognize 2 things on what is done outside of the reservation boundaries. One is that for parcel owners who have more than 20 acres, they're allowed to use multiple wells that would exceed the 10 acre feet, so long as no individual well exceeded the 10 acre feet and the wells were spaced more than a quarter mile apart. That's not for subdivisions, that's for a single parcel, okay? Any subdivision, regardless of what size, is limited to 10 acre-feet on the state standard. We are proposing something a little different here. We look at the neatness of the 1/4 acre arrangement on this 40 acre plot here, and we think that there's some consistency there. 2, we think that those 40 acre parcels should be allowed to have 10 acre-feet each. Okay, and so, and this is a nice and tidy world that we're showing here with non-irregular boundaries that are all square. But if somebody had this 160 in this layout, our recommendation was to allow, you know, up to 10 acre-feet on unique 40 acre in holdings of a larger parcel. And that this would be that you could have a subdivision, you know, within these that would have 10 acre-foot maximums applied that way. So parcel size is bigger than the 20 acre parcel size that the state uses, but the options are a little more lenient on this other end. Is that complicated enough? We also think this is easier to implement. However, we are not envisioning prorating something. We're not envisioning that, like, you could put, first of all, it's not like you could do 40 acre-feet right here. We think that this needs to be dispersed to, you know, avoid the consequences of having a disproportionate effect on adjacent owners, that kind of thing, with the clustering. We also don't think like, oh, if you've got a 40 and a 60, you get 15. They need to be full blocks, you know, within, and that we have some language to that effect that, you know, get to tinker with, unless the idea is discard the wholesale.
The development for each of those would be limited to domestic.
These 10 acre-foot amounts, it gets back to the permit exception term that perhaps needs to be improved, but this would really be looking at existing 602s for any type of use, not stock 605s, not pre-73 uses, any individual or shared domestic allowances that have been issued and developed here. I think that's the main bulk of what we'll be looking at.
Makes sense? Okay.
Next, please. We've identified a need to address RVs. And so to do this, we dived into the DEQ circular 4 standards. The approach that we've taken here is to recognize that they are looking for a 400 gallon per day requirement for the 5-bedroom home. We took the, we took that as, multiply that out towards our maximum amounts and determined that, of the same. I'm sorry, I'm not in a very good job explaining this right now. So we took the 5-bedroom standard. We looked at the requirements for an RV pad without sewer. We looked at the requirements for an RV pad with sewer. And we came out of this with a maximum recommendation that would be for development domestic allowance, where we would suggest 40 without sewer and then 20 with the sewer.
What size parcel would that be?
So this is kind of a different standard because the RVs are often the RV arrangements that we've seen are they're kind of an array. I've seen some where there's individual parcels for each pad and they have intention of selling those. I've seen some where they're all within one park. So this idea is really limited to a development.
Okay.
So, however that development works, they could divide that or not divide that. But, you know, and of course, we think we could do some math to sort this into homes and RVs, you know. But, under, this does tie into the 5, allowance standard. That's where we kind of went through this and we figured, you know, the standard 1 out of 5 would probably have that roughly that 40 GPD requirement. And it's an approach. We think this could work though, and it has a defined kind of arrangement that might help folks.
Question?
Yep.
So I don't know what the state's rules are on tiny homes, but I'm assuming that provisions for RVs are comparable, given the square footage in them. I know Missoula is really grappling with this right now with housing. Helena is trying to take a look at this. Different communities on this reservation are looking at tiny homes as an alternative. But this becomes the sticky bit, and parking apparently, because the parking that, for instance, Missoula requires a certain amount of space for parking, and that space is larger than most of the tiny homes. So, would a tiny home be considered comparable to an RV?
We've not talked up tiny home standards, but we do have a catch-all, which is that if you're looking for something else, you give us a water use plan.
Okay.
And we'll try to do our best to, you know, because we recognize it's gonna be different hopes and dreams for things that are unique, and we don't want to slash people's opportunities for that, but we probably can't prescribe for every scenario.
Gotcha. Okay.
How did you wind up with the numbers of 40 and 20?
So that's like, we took the 400 times 5 and then divided by either 50 or 100.
But that doesn't apply. It's the 100 gallons per day for an RV pad. Not 400, because you're at a quarter of what the 10 acre feet limit is with 20 pads at 100 gallons per day. And this kind of flies in the face of what the committee that we had talked about was using an engineer's report to base an approval on. If an engineer came in with a report that provided the information on those water uses, which has to go in front of the DEQ and get approved anyways, then that's what we would consider.
Well, we certainly weren't trying to fly in the face of anything here.
Well, I'm just telling you, that's a significant departure from what we had discussed. And I guess to me, that's pretty capricious. Since it's not, you're not using the right numbers.
What numbers do you think would be better?
Well, I'm just running the numbers and I just ran the numbers. So if I use 100 gallons per day for an RV pad, 20 pads equates to 2.2 acre feet. That's a quarter of what the allowable 10 acre feet is.
Well, let's give us a chance to go back and revise that.
Okay, well, I'm just running numbers to be considered. I'm trying to make this legally defensible.
Sure.
That's where I'm coming from, because I can just see we're gonna get challenged, so we need to be in line with. And I guess that was why we had discussion that if somebody came in with an RV development, that they have to go through DEQ for approval. So they have to come in with an engineer's report that substantiates that, and that's what the DEQ is gonna give them approval on that engineer's report, so.
And that's gonna be one of our requirements, is a DEQ.
Well, what we had talked about was just like this, using the minor subdivision of 5 lots or less for the development too, was because then that's already an established limit under state law. And so then we would have some legal document to refer back to, or some regulations to refer back to for how we arrived at our numbers or our position on this.
So, yeah, and I see where he's going, we're trying to use the kind of precedent set by DEQ. And I guess the only thing that, you know, and when you were saying we're gonna require, you know, DEQ approval, if it's on trust property, they're not gonna get DEQ approval, they're not gonna seek DEQ approval.
No, but I didn't say DEQ approval, I said an engineer's report that's stamped by a PE.
Yeah, right.
Is what we had talked about. If some engineer comes in and you know, I don't know how many will be on trust land, but most developments are gonna be on private property, so it's gonna have to go through DEQ review.
But that only deals with the fee property, not the trust.
Yeah, and I guess I'm
So
not,
that's where
I don't know how that works.
That's why I kind of like, using the basis of a number, maybe the numbers are wrong, but there's a thought process here conceptually that is anchored into, you know, some policy somewhere.
right, yeah, yep. Move on.
All right.
I'm just bringing up points
Yeah.
For
consideration.
we think it's important to clarify water measurement mandates. We think we should be super clear that water measurement requirements for existing permit exceptions and or new individual or shared allowances to be very limited. So that water measurement will only be required for development and domestic allowances. In other words, if you approach the 10-acre foot value without having something under this specific capital development domestic allowance, we're not engaging in some mandatory water measurement. I won't cut us out of the option if we have problems, which is consistent with anywhere else with you know, this office's ability to impose water measurement. We're not looking to do that, but we won't eliminate that option if there is some unusual circumstance that required that to get something resolved. But absolutely not going to run out and start up water measurements just because somebody's approaching 10-acre feet. That was probably easy. All right, we'll see. We'll see. There has been, this last one, there's been some discussion about whether or not especially business individual domestic allowances for businesses need to require a hookup to an actual structure. And we have determined that because of the word sites in the definition, we do not think that it needs to be attached to a structure. We want to clarify that in the WPNP because it's already come up. And we think that this, could include, fields, campies, industrial settings, or other areas where essential business operations occur. Kind of a little bit of a one-off, but it's an important one, as we kind of go forward.
And
In other words, if
that would
you
be
had-
primarily outside of, communities, communities with infrastructure.
Well, it's definitely alleviate somebody's need to bring us a letter if they're within, the required distance from a municipal, water supply system, but this could allow someone to put in a well and, irrigate up to 7/10 of an acre of orchard with their well, and so long as that orchard is part of the business, without there being a connection to, a structure that, like a business structure. And frankly, we just need you to, as a board, either agree with that or tell us something different. Yeah, that's why it's kind of why we're bringing it forward. We did have, some internal debate about this in our office, so.
Oh, now the Yeah, okay, all right. Well, get it to us, Ken was asking that you get it to us, and then we have time to look at it and think about it some more.
Okay, and you've got it, and we'll give it to you again.
Okay.
Okay.
You guys wanna jump into drafting?
I don't know, what time is it? 4 o'clock, we got an hour?
So before we leave this, one question I have, isn't there some limitations on the amount of irrigation and whatnot that can be used under domestic development allowances? And what are those? 0.25 acres per parcel. And what application rate do you use for that?
Oh, the irrigation time is April to October.
But of volume wise,
Oh, it's the same as the DNRC standard.
2.5
For an acre.
acre, yeah, so,
Per acre.
so. And what about for the individual domestic use? Isn't that, what's the limit for domestic use on those?
7/10 of an acre.
Okay. 7/10 of
Shared
an acre.
changes, when you go to shared with 2, it's half acre, shared with 3, it's quarter acre.
That's for irrigation or
For irrigation, yes.
yeah, but for strictly domestic use, what's the number?
There's not a number.
Okay. So just running some numbers out of curiosity. So you would get 0.625 acre feet per parcel for irrigation. Up to, and then if you multiply that by 5, that gives you 3.125 acre feet. So if you can go up to 10 acre feet, then that leaves you roughly 6. You could get 1.5, so you could get 1.5 acre feet per domestic development then, for domestic use. I'm just trying to figure out some scenarios here.
Sure, and so, and you have to, when you add in the the amount for domestic, like NRC would have an acre foot for
Yeah.
each house. And
Right.
so now that's gonna bring you up to what, like 8? And then, stock, if they've got it, outbuildings. This board is allowed up to 3. Other connections, which includes ADU, mother-in-law, barn dominium, shop with apartment or without apartment, so it's a shed, those types of things. And that's where you end up, you know, you're at an 8 acre foot limit with the additional uses, it's conservative. Yeah.
Yeah, so we already have some sideboards built into this volume thing anyway, so.
Yes, and if you go into the development domestic allowance arrangement, you know, you still gotta measure the water. I mean,
Right.
we don't have a choice about
It's
that.
part of the compact,
So,
stated in
right.
there.
So, you know, the question is like, you know, is 5 the right number? Right now, it's, you know, at the 5 number, because that's what I understood to be the, you know, minimum.
Minor septic.
So,
Right. Okay,
It's a guide.
yeah, I'm just trying to add up numbers, see how they
Yeah, yeah.
shake out, so.
No. So we have an hour, quite a bit to actually fit into that. You want to shuffle anything around here, actually, because we've got number 6. And then we've got a closed session to fit in. You want your closed session after 5?
I can stick around to whatever.
I'm fine. Okay, we'll run everything else till 5, so we've got the, should we tackle 6 and then we can close out till 5 with number 5? I mean, I'm just guessing if we don't, we're gonna run out of time for office lease. All right. Let's for approval, then let's jump to item number 6 and then we'll go to 5. See on the bird order here.
Mr. Chairman, board members,
Yep.
I understood you would like to talk about our commercial lease. Now,
Yeah,
okay,
let's do that.
so the building owner is about to embark on some building improvements. Some are in the maintenance category, which would be replacement of the furnace, which is at the end of its life, replacement of the hot water tank, which is at the end of its life, replacement of the sump pump in the basement, which is no longer effective, and at the end of its life. She's got a contractor from down the road that's seems to be selected at this time, not finalized. She's offering at this point to add air conditioning to the heater replacement. She is hoping that, very strongly hoping that, and maybe on the level of the AC upgrade would be dependent on an extension of the lease by the board of this building. So she wanted me to talk to you about that and see if the board would be willing to do something that looks like a modification of a past draft lease agreement that we had done with substantive changes in that it would no longer be the leasee doing any of the air conditioner upgrades. She is still, her preference would be a 4-year extension. As a reminder, here in May, we'll be at the end of our 2nd year. So there's another year after that. Her proposed rates, our May rate will go up to $2,250 a month. She's hoping that on the extension for 4th, 5th, and 6th, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th years would look like 4th year, 2,400. And an increase of 150 per month. 5th year would be 2,550. Another 150 a month increase. 6th year, 2,700. 7th year, 2,850. The upgrades do not include window upgrades for the fairly dated windows. We have a few windows that we do have, which will affect energy.
So for clarification, our current lease ends when?
Midnight on the 14th of May, 2025.
And has she indicated that these improvements are conditional upon extending the lease?
Is not offered that exact language, but she thinks that a lease extension is essential for her to do that. The one improvement, maybe the maintenance as well.
And would you mind going over those numbers again? Our current lease is how much?
So starting in May, our lease goes to 2,250, May the 15th. So 14 days. We jump up. And which is 150 a month more than we're paying right now.
And then it goes 2550 and then 2700 and 2850. If we
The 4th year, so starting the 3rd year, which starts May 15th, in 14 days, we're already in, that's still part of our existing lease. We are committed to 2,250 per month, which is 150 a month increase from what we're paying this last year. Okay. Her proposal is that the 4th year, which would be an extension year, would start at 2,400. And then each year after that would have increases of 150 per month at 1-year intervals.
Comments, questions, the only thing I'm thinking about is, or one of the main things I'm thinking about is the idea of trying to get us into a new building. And I've just started the process of reaching out to try to come up with some contacts to find the architect to do some planning for us. we're a ways off. I can think that we are a minimum 2 years away from getting something, even if things go well. So we're probably 3 to 4 years out. Anyway. My only, the only catch here is if we agreed to a 4-year extension. And we were successful in getting something in less than 4 years. What would that do? And I would only be concerned about that. Beyond that, I think, we need the improvements, and we're gonna be here until we have a new building anyway, so I'm not sure where you wanna go with this, but that's the proposal, yeah.
Just as a reminder, the lease proposal that we did have had an exit strategy, so long as the board was to provide a written notice, a minimum of 2 months in advance of the last month. And, and that was for all, 4 through 7 years of the extension, but that contemplated us funding the air conditioner upgrade. So if what you're talking about is a concern, maybe we could consider locking in for sure 2 years, and then on 6 and 7 we implement this language that we had already drafted, to where if as we approach the termination of the 5th year, we gave written notice 2 months in advance of that, we would be able to exit.
Yeah, I don't know if 2 years is gonna do it. I don't know. I think we're gonna be a minimum 2 years. We're probably 2 to 4 years out before we get a new building, is my guess. But I don't know, if things went real well, it could be 2 years. Are you saying that the lease extension, if we just said, well, we agree to 4 years, would not include an out in the language?
Well, it's not settled. I mean, that's what we're here to.
Does the current lease have that language in it?
No,
Oh,
you're committed.
So does the extension start after the 3 years or at the end of this 2-year period?
This contemplates an extension starting at the end of the 3rd year of the existing. So the existing lease, which we're almost at the end of the 2nd year of the existing lease, that 3-year lease, that's static. We're not gonna modify that, and nobody's contemplating that, and sorry if there's confusion about it. She's looking to solidify things farther out than that.
Yeah.
and the end of the 3rd year, which would be the start of the 4th year, is when?
May the midnight on the 14th of May, 2025.
So I didn't write everything down. What were all the upgrades? Was she gonna fund all of the upgrades or just some of the upgrades?
There's only one upgrade that we're talking about, which is air conditioning.
Oh,
The other parts are
she's just gonna take care of those.
maintenance. Well, she's posed this as kind of a package. But
There are expenses,
there are expenses to her, for sure.
which other than air, heating and air include what again?
Sump pump that is downstairs in the basement, and part of the cause of the original mold problem. And then the water heaters on its last legs. It is rusted at the base. Other things that I would think about if we were gonna stay here a longer amount of time, would perhaps be a paint job on the interior. Windows. Need a push bar for that exit door. Some upgrades there, just for safety features. There's probably some electric things that need to get fixed as well. We have stucco on the outside that's cracked and missing.
When you say, if we're gonna stay longer, what does that mean? I mean, we know we're gonna be here at least 2, like you're saying. We need these,
I think
if we're going to go a 4-year extension.
Even if we're gonna stay here, extend by just 2 years, that means we're gonna be here for 3 more years. Yeah, those other things on the list need to be factors on what we really need to accomplish in this building.
And as you're adding these things, is she aware of these things, or are they things we would need to notify her of? Yeah.
She's aware that I think we need windows. She's also aware that she's unlikely that she would pay for those windows. Without
And
she did, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
She did mention that he is willing to entertain a discussion about sale of the building. She doesn't have a number. She's not actively listing this property, but there was interest in discussing the sale of the building, which she would be willing to discuss. Very particular about how I word that. That is the one thing that she preferred I state.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'm just wondering if we were to propose a certain 2-year extension with the option of extending further at the end of that, if needed. Would you guys want to propose that back? I guess that's the question, because we probably sounds like we need to propose something back to her and see if in that time frame she's still willing to do the heat and air or some pump and water heater, at least those at a minimum, right?
Yes, and the certain timing was needs to be expected on the air.
Heat and air, yeah.
Yeah, that's gotta be done.
Okay.
Yeah, so thoughts.
Well, just for your planning purposes, I'd have to talk to somebody at the state, but the next legislative session is January 2025. I don't even know if you could get anything in on it, but it would take an appropriation through the legislature, I would think, to do
We're
that.
gonna get a building.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
We're
so,
not, we're, like I said, that's why we're at least a minimum,
yeah,
we're probably 2 to 4 years out.
well,
anyway.
that's exactly where I think it's probably realistically closer to 4 years. But I don't, just because the legislature only meets every 2 years.
Yeah, and we got no guarantee of doing anything
Yeah,
in 2 years.
yeah. But I would think it would take a lot of background work to start that process,
Well, and that's what we talked about. We've got enough in place right now. I think the state and the tribe both agreed that we should go ahead and start planning.
Yeah,
And if we can do that, so our first step would be to find an architect, get an estimate, get some costs in front of them and see if they'll at least pay for getting the planning done. The second part of that whole process is gonna be location, as we talked about.
yeah,
And the state and the tribe really need to weigh in on that because they have to agree on location.
yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, and this is, so if we start now, we're just that part of it's, a
Yeah,
couple years out.
at least, yeah. So, yeah, I guess where I'm going is 3 to 4 year extension. It's probably fairly realistic. So.
I would think that if we went for, we would wanna have language in there that if something changed and we were able to get out of here in less than 4, that we would, have the ability to do that.
Yeah,
So you wanna propose that back? Or you're willing to, with these numbers, with her agreeing to do this work, now, and include language and the language talked about for an exit. See if she'd be willing to agree to that.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I would suggest that maybe 2 of the years of extension be firm and that the exit be applied
2 plus 2.
6 and 7 years. That, because I think past 3 years, we would wanna include some option. Maybe I might even suggest that it would start with 4 and then see if we can get some of these other items handled before we add the 5th commitment. Unless the board is interested in painting rebuilding. Or there's window. I mean, the windows are really, I'm not
Yeah,
asking for weird stuff.
yeah, no, tell us what you're proposing there so we can nail it down.
I think we should definitely say, yeah, if you're gonna put the AC in, committed to the 4th year, if you wanna match this with the windows, we'll do 5th year. And then we retain 6 and 7 with the exit language that we had previously drafted. And I don't think that the board should waver on that because of you seem driven to pursue an alternate building strategy. And
You said heat and air, but I would, you also mentioned some pump and water heater, so if we can make sure all that gets done, that'd be I think minimum.
Mr. Chairman, how about I rewrite this, I draft you a lease. And I'll circulate it for your consideration so that we can go from the verbal to seeing something a little bit more concrete.
Yep.
That I think will accomplish.
It's good. If you don't mind running through Haley. Sure, she's.
Oh, yeah. And
Okay.
This last version was running through her as well, so.
Okay. Sounds good. Georgia.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know the existing windows need upgrading. Were you also recommending getting some windows in here, cutting through the block?
If this board was to entertain the idea of purchasing this building, okay, then that would be something I would consider to be essential. I don't know that we have that. That's a big commitment. I know that the building owner's not gonna want to embark on that. Whether or not she even let us do that would be a good question also.
That's a good question.
But
Okay.
that would be ideal to have windows there.
Yeah. Otherwise, Sidney stuck with a stick-on window for a while, so just thinking about you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, and if you got any, happy to entertain any other ideas too, so.
All right, work up the draft. That sound good? Good. All right, do that, give it to us. Those ideas and we'll try to get on with it. All right, we got a half hour. best use of it.
You get to drive? Let's do it. Is your finger all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Would you smash in the door?
Cut it with a saw.
Oh, no. Goodness, no, it won't be all right.
I hope that's the only time you ever use that sentence in your lifetime, so.
Yeah.
You don't want to have too many repeats of that, right?
Section.
Yeah, so here we are at the section on domestic allowances. What we've done is we went through here and tried to add those proposed solutions to the 9 issues, and we've done so with track changes, which I'm not sure. Simple markup changes us to kind of looking at it clean. If the board would rather see the line strike arrangements, we can do that also. But the first item is this definition of sites, as you'll recall, which is almost in reverse order. Not quite. But we think we should define sites as is seen here. If the board would like to see individual or shared business allowances tied to the building, this would be the time to chime in.
All right, sites defined. Oh, potential. Flag. Use of the word essential. The phrase essential business. The way it reads, someone could read that to say that something is or is not an essential business. But you're not talking about an essential business, you're talking about business operations.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I did tell Mr. Frakes that you have a problem with this word.
Well, I just jumped out at me, but anybody else, I don't want to, not on my word, just.
No, I think it should be omitted too, because you hark back to the COVID days and essential
Yeah.
meant a particular thing. So.
All right, thank you for that modification. How does the rest of it look?
Anything else? Again, not that we have to actually say anything about it, but I think you're talking about locations that are outside municipalities, right?
Or excluded through a letter.
Or exclude through a letter, but yeah.
So,
Yeah, okay.
It's implied.
Yep, so just trying to,
Yeah, you don't have
let you know, we haven't lost sight of that direction.
or understanding at least, yeah, I just trying to understand it.
Yep. Awesome, there's something.
Yeah.
All right, here we get into the number of connections and standards. And, you know, the individual domestic allowances, if you could just maybe swap to the, markup view, a little bit. So we didn't have much issue with, A and B, which are pretty straightforward, you know, and out of the ordinance for clarification here. This is the section where we had some different language about development domestic allowances. And you know, this is where we look to more than one, but not more than 5 homes and or businesses. So, you know, the first sentence is definitely going to be the most important one. I understand we might need to wrestle around with the RV stuff a minute later, but if the board can focus first on that 1, but not more than 5, which are notes that I had directly out of the meeting that we had in the office, but needs to be affirmed here.
Scroll up for a minute to A. Our business.
There's a little overlap.
Yeah, I guess what I thought came out of our meeting was we were falling back to the minor subdivision of, I mean, of not more than 5 lots. Couldn't you have more than 1 home or business on 1 lot?
That's why it's limited to the number of homes and or businesses, so that the lot structure is irrelevant.
But that's why we had lots, or we were using the minor subdivision rules as our basis for the development domestic allowance, which is lots, not homes or businesses.
My record of your and Seth's conclusion about this was just 1, but not more than 5 homes and or businesses. So if that was inaccurate, this would be the time. But this is something that we can administer. The lots arrangement is left.
Well, I'm reading right from Seth's memo that, you know, he refers to a minor subdivision of 5 or fewer parcels. And then he goes on again to state that the rationale is that a minor subdivision definition for a development allowance with some crosswalk for non-typical parcels. So, and that was our rationale, was to have, so if we got challenged legally that minor subdivision was how we arrived at the number of lots or parcels or whatever that could be used, or this applies to.
Haley,
So I think in addition to what Roger just said, if you're looking for, or I guess if you're thinking of, you know, what to harken back to for a basis. The ordinance does contemplate that the connections are for homes and or businesses. And so within each one of those sections for domestic allowances, so individual, shared, and development, there are specific subsections that do attribute to the connection being to multiple homes and or businesses, for example, for domestic development, domestic allowances.
This language also doesn't limit the use of guest house, ADUs, tiny homes, things like that. You could have those in addition to a home or business.
So B and C could, there B. The other way. The other way.
Oh, sorry.
So be sure, so, so shared domestic allowance and development domestic allowance, the definition of those ties to the number of connections.
There's no word to.
I'm posing that as a question.
Shared domestic allowance is, a shared. Domestic allowance is, limited to being connected to at least two. But not more than 3 homes.
And
And
then I'm just trying to remember, so is there a volume limit there too?
no, this is more of a structural standard.
So then you go to development domestic allowance. So is there some overlap between those? I mean,
There is, Mr. Chairman, you could, pursue a development domestic allowance for 2. Or 3, which would be an overlap with shared domestic allowance.
that's what I'm getting at.
The difference, of course, being that, the development domestic allowance, that limitation would be 10 acre feet per year as opposed to a shared domestic allowance, which would be 2.4.
That's what I was asking.
Feet per
Yeah.
year. And then of course, under C, you would have a mandatory water measurement requirement.
Yeah, okay, that's how I was asking. Yeah, I was trying to remember the exact definitions of shared domestic and development. Domestic, yeah, thank you.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes,
the exact term in the ordinance, so it's not an actual defined term, but it's described within those sections that pertain to each category of domestic allowance. And so the term that's actually multiple for development domestic allowance. So that's where you get that overlap of could be 2 or 3, but then with the, specific descriptors that go on to it. So the water measurement and the volume piece.
all right. Thank you. More questions, more comments?
Well, scroll down a little farther so we can see. So on our discussions too, we, I guess backing up to this, my notes from our meeting were you've got to change, but we had less or greater than 1 and up to 6 lots is what we said in our meeting, which is the same, but you got homes or businesses. And so I guess the reason behind the lots was again, just to use of the minor subdivision rules as our backstop for a legal challenge. So if that's consistent, if homes and businesses are consistent with that, and if Haley can substantiate that, then I'm okay with that. But in all of this too, we had other conversations about that an engineer could come in with a water use plan for review and approval. And I don't see that anywhere in here.
Any deviation from these standards requires the applicant to provide a water use plan pursuant to
All right.
section W2-11723. So that's the
I
last.
see that way
sentence.
down at the bottom now. Okay.
Yeah, that's on there, and that is, that's what that's intended to
Okay.
directly reference right there.
If we go to lots, just a question, do we open the door to having allowing multiple businesses and homes on lots? Is that the hang up there?
No, because I thought a subdivision is generally the subdivision, is 5 lot subdivision, is just a parcel of land that typically has 1 home per lot.
This is designed to handle that typical structure, but because we don't always deal with things that are subdivided. For us, the connection, which is right out of the ordinance, is really more specific to look at these homes and their businesses, which keeps us consistent with the ordinance and is actually quite a bit easier for our office to administer. The crosswalk, obviously, between 5 homes and or businesses and the minor subdivisions that's pretty easy to find that conclusion. This is a little more generous because it would allow things to be divided differently, than a strict definition underneath here.
Think what it's more? Okay.
It's probably the hardest sentence in the whole thing right here, so I mean, just.
And it was interesting that in the ordinance, it talks to the individual and shared connected to one, to a physical house or business. But you get into the development and we're talking parcels, so it switches from connection to homes and businesses to parcels. So it's weird that transition happens. Why wouldn't they carry the language through?
I guess I would question that, and maybe ask for a little bit of clarification on that part. The development domestic allowance section under 6G specifically states that the allowance is physically connected to multiple homes and or businesses that together constitute a development.
Perhaps you're referencing the definition of development, which does look to parcels.
Well, I was looking at our definition as parcel, here we have it as connection, right? And you were suggesting parcels? And that would be, why were you suggesting a parcel?
Well, so because 5 or fewer parcels is a minor subdivision. And there's pretty explicit DEQ regulations with regard to minor subdivisions. So, and that's kind of what Seth was going on.
I can see that and I understand and I
Yeah.
see what Seth is saying. My question is, do we want to focus our intentions around what the ordinance says or what DEQ says?
Yeah,
And I'm thinking we probably need to stay focused around the ordinance language.
yeah, the ordinance does say multiple homes and businesses. Doesn't give a number.
Great drafting, right?
And while I don't disagree with, the concept of that Seth has laid out there, but I think, do we accomplish the same thing? I mean,
Yeah.
Do we accomplish the same goal?
Yeah, as long as that's there, that's the goal, I'm okay with that.
And we're consistent,
So, yeah, but the next sentence under C, the second sentence under C, I want that. I would recommend we strike that because just what I said before, you don't have any basis for that, but yet you have the basis then down under the deviation. If somebody comes in with a deviation, you can fall back to that.
Yep, Mr. Vice Chair, I think you're along the lines of what I was thinking with that being more of like a policy decision, right? Like just a internal OE policy based consideration rather than within C here.
So I guess, what are any thoughts on that? Striking that sentence?
Sorry, I was just gonna try to explain a little bit more on where it came from. So we had, so there's like 400 gallons per day for the typical 5-bedroom house, right? And when we take that 400 and multiply that by 5, which is the connection number that we just had in the previous sentence, and you end up with 2,000, right?
But you're talking two different types of developments. An RV park is not a home.
I was just going off the same DEQ standards.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's why they have different standards for those things. A 5-bedroom home gets so much, that's, then you're comparing. They set those standards for those individual things, so you're trying to bring them back under the same umbrella.
Using the 450 additional gallons per day.
I was focused,
For an additional bedroom.
I was focused on, so it's what, 400?
400 gallons per day for a 5-bedroom home. You can have a maximum of 5-bedroom homes. That's 2,000 gallons per day for the entire development. And then what we did is we went from taking that 2,000 number and we used the DEQ water use standards for RV pads with and without sewage. And we back calculate how many you can put on there to hit that 2,000 number. And so that comes out to 20 with sewer and 40 without sewer. And it's not based in the 10-acre-foot limit. Because the sewer connection is really only for DEQ. which doesn't account for any lawn and garden watering. It's all stuff that goes down the drains
Right.
into the sewer. So that's kind of how we got those numbers.
Just a direct modification of the same standards out of. Circular board, right?
So that's to run strictly to RV, and then they're gonna want a lawn and garden component.
We've factored in some amount of lawn and garden
Yeah,
is sort of associated with all these developments.
George's wheels are spinning. You wanna see the math?
I was doing the math, so.
Still not sure of the numbers, Roger. I mean, if you're not, I think
Scroll
we
back
could-
down,
let's, you know, let's,
I
do we
scroll
need
to
to
those,
review those numbers?
I guess I'm. Of the opinion that sentence needs to be stricken because it's covered under the next one.
you're saying it's covered under
The any
double I.
any deviation from these. Standards, you know, they come in with a water plan, I mean. You're right in that those numbers are similar, but then house, a big house like that's gonna have a big yard, it's gonna have a lot for irrigation. You're gonna have those individual RV pads that probably aren't gonna have any irrigation. So you can't mix the two like that. They're standalone developments, they're different types of developments.
What would it hurt to strike it, you know? I mean, if you don't have it, what do you get? I mean, you fall back on what Roger was talking about.
I guess my concern would be. Do we know how many? Do we know how many people are requesting RV developments? And do we need specific language for that? I mean, I understood how you got the math. And you made it clear you're not factoring in the same lawn and garden as you would for a house. Because RV parks are different from homes. Was that part of the, I guess my question is, was part of the inclusion of that language? Because you're foreseeing a request specifically
I have-
for RV?
I have massive proposed RV. Developments and. Yeah, it's not even really hypothetical,
It's here.
it's here.
Yeah, but that has to go in front of DEQ and it has to have a very detailed engineered water plan, and that's gonna be part of your submittal that you get. And that goes along with I then, that you've got up there. So that's the checks and balances right there.
So Roger, just so I'm clear, I like how you have really helped us understand our need for defensibility on things, so just to make sure I understand. Does it help the office of the OE to have really bright lines on how many RV pads there can be? Or are you saying that the development plan would specify that on a site specific basis?
The development plan's gonna specify that, yeah.
Then my question gets to then what are the sideboards? that Ethan has used?
He reviews if it's consistent with, if that development plan or water distribution plan fits the limitations of the domestic development allowance.
It work?
I think that if we're gonna add that level of review onto an allowance, we should probably charge more. Cause that's assessing an engineer report for what amounts to a smaller, you know, out of pocket use would be an additional. It's not quite a permit, but it's more than what would normally be required for an allowance and the review of an allowance, you know, in the day-to-day. It's also kind of tough under the 30-day window that we have when it comes in the door. You know, all of a sudden, we're outside of looking at like the basic arrangements of possessory interest and the more modest terms of allowance, and needing to review an engineer's report. I'm not trying to be resistant to the direction, but I am trying to honor the reality of what our office will have to do when expected, you know, to go from a more basic standard to something where we'll take a look at what you submit and review some of that.
Well, I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean, if it's gonna take more time, come back with a number then.
Yep.
So,
Well, they're still being required to measure too.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that-
And
that's
that's,
a real component right there.
and that's a huge component of it, because that's gonna take time to review their data too, that data also. I mean, so the domestic development allowance is a lot more complicated animal than the other two.
Mhm.
So there's no reason why it shouldn't be more expensive.
And when we get down to the section on a water, on providing a water use plan, let's remember to address timelines in there, so that, you know, maybe if an applicant wants to, you know, engage in, you know, and I really didn't want to get down to 22-117.3, but well, if an applicant wants to, you know, engage in a deviation from the standard, maybe we've got to get a little bit more time to manage that.
I got one more thing, go back up. So right there, where it says well below 35 gallons a minute, it should say is 35 gallons a minute. That's what's in the ordinance. Is 35 gallons a minute.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just make a kind of maybe final comment here on this.
Yes.
I think one foreseeable concern that I have with maybe some considerations of RVs is that RVs don't necessarily fit within the definition of home or business. And so we would need to contemplate perhaps a definition of recreational vehicle and how, and maybe that consideration of whether it should just be considered as a home or business, or it's, you know, it's its own separate consideration. So I just wanted to make a note of that. DEQ, when they consider this, they do have their own definition, although it's, it's more so geared towards actual recreation and camper, not necessarily like a mobile home. So just wanted to point that out.
And that's gonna hold true with other things too, you know, because somebody will come in with a motel and want a well for that motel, and it'll be based on the number of beds in that motel, and they'll have to have an engineer's report for that. So all of those things are gonna happen under that I, where that's where you're gonna have to deal with it.
We need it or less after the project.
Yeah, and when you get to RVs, it's quite a range, isn't it? You get to the AOA park in Folsom, and those are million or
Yeah.
million and a half things with washing machines and a couple of bathrooms and.
Yeah.
Versus my 1950 Fleetwood that can park in any little parking lot spot at Walmart, right? So anyway,
So let's wrap up this section.
Or consensus?
Anything else here? Aye, and the last sentence, good, are we good? All right, we're consensus for now, and we gotta call it good for the day.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock.
that's
Well.
good, cause I can't compute any more gallons per minute. Acre feet, my brain is full. So,
All right, guys. Thank you. Let's, public comments. Heard a no back here. No public comment, anybody online?
If anyone online would like to make a comment, raise your hand, I'll allow you to speak. Seeing no public comment.
You see no public comment, hands up, so we'll close the public comment section. Next meeting dates, you guys wanna take a quick look at next meeting dates? And still with us?
Yeah.
All right. Any proposal?
Not the 15th.
Not the 15th.
I can't do the 29th, but I'm free the next 3 Wednesdays.
Second.
Yeah, I'm free the 22nd.
22nd,
I can do it 22nd.
22nd, Ken.
No,
22nd?
I have the same schedule, you know, I can. Any Wednesday I can attend remotely from 1 to 2:30.
Okay, all right, well, we appreciate you being here today. So 22nd, so we'll phone in on the 22nd, the next meeting. Now, remember, we may be trying to push for additional meetings here. So when we start hearing back from the committee members. If we're gonna try to get some policy stuff done. So let us know. We'll propose the next regular meeting on the 22nd, but if you need something sooner, if we need to do something, let us know.
River honoring for me next week, so, Monday at about 3:30 through Wednesday, I won't be available. Thursday, I'll be available.
It's that time of year already?
They moved it up a week ahead of usual.
Did they?
Yeah,
Oh, that's a good.
Seventh and eighth is the public.
yeah. Yeah, the 6th is the meal in the evening and the honoring. And we have lots of teepees if anybody wants to come out and stay in a teepee.
I think that's the most beautiful thing. I love that.
I've been doing it since it started, under security,
Oh,
so I stay out there through the whole thing.
So I was down there one of the first years they did it. I've got a photo. Oh, I think that was 1992.
With that.
Yeah. Me in front of a TV, and that, do you remember that's when coronavirus was a big deal?
Mhm.
I had a TV full of kids in there and a mouse ran through. And we were all freaking out.
All right, anything else? George, anything?
I'm good.
Georgia?
No, that's it.
Georgia? Ken, anything else?
Nope,
Motion to adjourn this portion?
motion adjourned.
Motion,
Second.
second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna